Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns and welcome back to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. And the title for today's feature was an open question. With the public records disaster that Jeff Landry has just encountered, are we looking at the football equivalent of Johnny Manziel? And for those of you who may not be football fans, let me briefly say that the reason I'm making that open question is because Johnny Manziel, also known as Mr. Football, was a phenomenal quarterback at Texas A&M. And he used what was purely raw talent to have an absolutely remarkable college career. And as a result, he was drafted very high in the NFL by the Cleveland Browns. And what the Browns subsequently discovered is that while he had unbelievably raw talent on the field, there wasn't much up here, and the NFL game is drastically different than college. In fact, Nick Saban was once quoted as saying, I believe it was Saban, it may have been the former coach of the Saints, but I believe it was Saban that said, why does a quarterback like Peyton Manning have such success and Ryan Leaf, who were drafted in the same draft, was such a flop? It's the speed of the game in the NFL. In college, you may have an added fraction of a second to squeeze that pass in to your wide receiver. That gap will close like that in the NFL. The speed of the game, but even more importantly is the mental part of the game. You've got to be focused. You have to be extremely focused if you're going to be a quarterback who's going to excel. And as the governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry is the quarterback of our team. Okay, it's that simple. And they soon found out that Johnny Manziel, unlike watching film and getting ready for the game, he was out partying, and doing everything but focusing on football, and figured, hey, I got the raw talent, I'll get out there, I can do whatever I want. And I'm making that analogy of Jeff Landry because I believe that his potential talent is unreal, okay? And I'm going to give you an example of why I say that. Jeff Landry was the keynote speaker at a function that was on March the 7th. I can easily remember the date because it was my late mother's birthday. So March the 7th will always stick in my head. But he was the keynote speaker of a very large audience. I know conservatively there were 300 people, and I'm being conservative, I'm sure, in attendance on this. And I consider my text to be public record, and I'm going to read out to you just a few texts that I sent as I was observing Jeff Landry give his presentation. I said, this is what I'm texting in real time. This guy has guts. He just called public education in Louisiana a, quote, failure factory, unquote. I would figure that would have been all over the news. It wasn't. There were what can clearly be identified as liberal news media there. I never saw this quote. I'm a little stunned that it didn't come out, but it didn't. I went on to say, there's about 400 people here, no way for me to know. He's been ribbing back and forth with Moon Griffon. And Jeff did a wonderful job of giving his upbringing. He said things such as, look, everybody thinks, well, you got to go to college right away. And he said, my mother lost a lot of sleep over this, but I didn't go to college. And I look at this time I spent out in the workforce as basically like taking an insurance policy. Because now we drill it into high school students' heads that college is so mandatory that when they get to college they find out they're not cut out for it, depression sets in. And I thought that was an outstanding statement. He did an outstanding job at this presentation, okay? That was a well-taken point. He later said, and so I go to college, I finally get the degree, and I figure, whew, done with school, thank God, and he later said, and the next thing you know, my wife's telling me, you got to go to law school. If we're going to do this political thing, you got to go to law school. And he said that I really didn't want to go to law school because if there's two things my father cannot stand, it's attorneys and politicians. And of course, the obvious inference there was that he would be both upon graduation from law school. He joked with Moon Griffon again. He said, Moon, you ought to have my father on your show. Then he paused and said, well, on second thought, Moon, maybe it wouldn't be such a great idea. So let me read just a couple of more texts that I sent. I said, I have dramatically underestimated Jeff Landry. He has a unique ability to make a personal connection with a vast swath of Louisiana citizens. He just wrapped up one hell of a speech. And he said he writes his own speeches, and I believe him, and I'll tell you why. Now, when I say write his own speeches, I have a good friend that says what he means by that is he's going to put 4 or 5 key bullet PowerPoints, and then he'll fill in the rest. That's fine. As far as I'm concerned, that's a speech. All right? And he did a phenomenal job of connecting with everyone in that audience to give the impression that, hey, look, I'm just a working stiff like y'all who happen to catch a couple of lucky breaks in life, and the next thing you know, I'm governor. And so that's why I'm making the analogy about the football equivalent of Johnny Manziel. Manziel had talent through the roof, as it's clear Jeff Landry can have when he chooses to exploit it or utilize it in an effective manner. What happened with Senate Bill 482 is it was a seat of the pants effort to go in here and we're going to cram something in that is accompanied by the providing security for the governor, which nobody's going to oppose. Well, maybe there will be 1 or 2 that just can't stand Jeff Landry and would, but for the most part, nobody's going to oppose that. Let's lump in the big 800-pound gorilla. Let's get them to stop being able to have these public records. Let me tell you something. My record stands for itself on having made these public records requests. And look, I was informed right before I did this that Governor Landry, along with Heather Clyde, were on the Moon Griffon show. I just listened to the podcast. They were on earlier this morning. And Jeff wants to try to paint this whole thing about fiscal matters. Fiscal. Okay? There is more to public records than just fiscal matters. Okay? We're talking about corruption, just like I put out before. You know, is it going to be acceptable for a trooper to take a picture of his genitalia and send it out, you know, and then say, you could have this to a female trooper? Okay, is I'm still trying to get that through public records. I can tell you there's a lot of upheaval going on as a result of that public records request. But this type of thing, and if you saw the way Scott Sternberg authoritatively shot Heather Clyde's arguments down, all right, this is the kind of thing that would be like Johnny Manziel going out of a night of full partying and then getting on the field with the Cleveland Browns and thinking, if I throw it, the receiver's going to get it because I am Johnny Manziel. Political equivalent. I am Jeff Landry. If I say we're going to do this, we're going to do this. All right? And it's blown up in his face. It has completely blown up in his face. And as I said, as the quarterback of the team, Jeff Landry is the head of the team. Okay? And I admired his guts, his courage, to say, look, the bottom line is public education has been a, quote, failure factory, unquote, all right? Well, I'm here to tell you, if you're going to be totally transparent, make the same statement about state police, okay, which has been the area that I have so focused on. Apparently, it's a different set of rules there. Burns ain't getting those public records, okay? We're going to continue to cover up and hide all of the problematic failure factory that exists at state police, okay? There's more than just fiscal matters, so stop thinking you're going to fool everybody by saying, you know, we provide fiscal transparency. Great. Want more transparency than that when you have problematic activities going on, and certainly the nature of the things that Billy Broussard, his own cousin, Billy Broussard on his own, has gathered a ton of information through public records requests that paint a horrible picture of the actions of some local government officials. Spin it any way you want, he's got the evidence, okay? If he didn't, I wouldn't have allowed him to go on sound off in the first place. And I'm sorry that Judge Ritchie has such unflattering commentary about what was then private citizen Jeff Landry, you know, saying that he filed an illegal lien and this, that, and that Billy should have, quote, choose your attorney carefully, unquote, implying that in hiring Jeff Landry, he didn't do so. But here's the thing. Jeff Landry has got to realize that as the quarterback of the team, and he talks about one Louisiana, there's other members of that team. Johnny Manziel was all self-centered too, okay? I think we have a very self-centered governor here, who, though he has an ability to make that connection in these speeches, as I told you, the reality is, who's Jeff hanging around with in his space? I mean, it's going to be the elite. Okay, it's going to be the Gidgers. It's going to be the Bollingers. That's who he's hobnobbing with. So while he can do a great job of making that connection, because I was flabbergasted at what a great job he does of that, at connecting with just the ordinary Joe Blow. The reality is when it's just Jeff Landry around, he wants the big hobnobbers. Okay, but when I said he's the quarterback of the team, here's what I meant. Let's put Heather Clyde as a wide receiver, okay, on the team, because he's basically throwing the pass to her and hoping she can score a touchdown, okay? Well, when the quarterback drops back, when he's going to deliver the ball, to a wide receiver, or more so, maybe I should have said a running back. In fact, let's change that. Heather Clyde is the running back, but she's going to catch a screen pass, all right? When you deliver that pass, you need to throw it with authority, because just like in the NFL, that gap's going to close fast, all right? You don't float some little lob out there and say, here you go ahead. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to have either a safety or a linebacker knock the living daylights out of her in this case, and that's what happened. She got walloped in that committee meeting. So that's what happens when you throw together a bill at the last second that you rely upon, and I'm just going to say it, it's my opinion, guidance from an executive council who I didn't find very impressive. I'm just going to say that in the one meeting that I had with Ms. Friel. But nevertheless, I assume that emboldened Senator Clyde to go in and literally talk down in an authoritative manner about citing this case, and repeatedly saying, well, we can't erase jurisprudence. You know, you got to be careful, because you're having to put a lot of confidence, just like you put confidence in your quarterback, okay? That he's going to deliver me this ball, he's going to deliver it in the right fashion to where I can elude an oncoming linebacker. It's a sad thing when a linebacker can come and waylay you. You know, it's understood when a safety would do it. But this was so poorly done that's what happened, okay? And so, using that football analogy, Jeff Landry has dropped back, he's in the pocket, he's dropped back about 12 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He dumps off a screen pass because the defense was coming. They tried to hope that, hey, maybe we can pull an audible, but they did this at the last second. They put the bill up there on the agenda, literally with no time for the defense to really gather itself, yet it did anyway. And I take great pride in the fact that I hurled up quite a number of the people who testified against the bill, okay? So that little strategy didn't work. So instead of giving her an authoritative pass to where she could turn, see the oncoming defender, try to make a move and run for a touchdown, he delivered her such a soft little floater that she caught it, she got whopped, and the ball was fumbled, okay? And now the other team is on the field. Now, I'm wrapping up this sound-off feature because the one thing I have to openly question is when you pull a boneheaded, idiotic move like this, to what degree is your credibility destroyed? And we're going to find that out, because even if he can cram together a constitutional convention in a 2-week period, and many of the things in that proposal that I have seen, I would strongly support, okay, from what I've seen of it. But I'm just going to tell you, by and large, people are not going to trust you when you pull a stunt like this. It's that simple. You will lose trust, okay? And you can talk all you want about, well, it's the Democrats and they're just upset. I'm a lifelong Republican, a lifelong conservative, and I have heard from a ton of others who aren't happy about that move that was presented last week. So, Jeff, my admonition to you would be to don't do like Johnny Manziel. either use what's here or at least consult with your advisors, who I would hope would have guided you away from this, because this was an unmitigated disaster. And it's not just Heather Clyde that got hung out to dry and got walloped in the backfield and fumbled. You also put Blake Miguez in a heck of a position, all right, because he's joined at the hip with Landry. I'm sure Blake ought to have enough common sense to know this is horrible, okay? And he voted yes. Landry, from what I'm told from my sources, had to work the phones to get 2 senators to flip in order to get it out of committee. Reese and Fazy, okay? Without that, guess what? It becomes a 4-4 tie, and then that forces Chairman Cleo Fields to have to make a vote. If you'll notice, if you look at that vote, Fields just smiled there, grinning the whole time like, and I let it slip that I knew how the vote was going to go. I did let it slip when I said, what y'all are about to do, and then I said, well, what you're doing. I said, what you're doing. I said, well, to correct myself, y'all haven't voted yet. And I saw a little smile come out of Cleo Fields' mouth, his whole face, and it was kind of like, you know what's about to happen here, don't you? And yeah, I knew what was going to happen. All right, but my point is, if those two had not flipped, okay, at the urging of their quarterback, guess what? It would have been a 4-4 tie. And that would have forced Cleo Fields to have to make a vote, which he did not want to do. For obvious reasons. He's running for Congress. A yes vote, and you look horrible. I mean horrible to prospective voters. And you give ammunition to any opponent. A no vote alienates freshly minted governor who has, it's no secret, worked hand in hand with you to get this district drawn the way you needed it drawn to have a realistic and decent shot of representing that area as its next congressman, if it's not overturned by the 3-judge panel that's already heard the arguments that the whole thing is unconstitutional because it's gerrymandered based on race. So, let me just say one last thing. I've sent out some emails. I mean, when I tell you I got angry over this, just like Scott Sternberg did, I did send out some emails saying that I have pulled Jeff Landry's lever for the last time, okay? I have voted for him every time he's been on the ballot and I had the opportunity. I voted for him Attorney General in 2015. I voted for him for Attorney General in 2019. I didn't really want to, but I gave the reason I voted for him in 2023. It was in the hope that if he just barely got over 50%, he would have enough. Again, use your head, Jeff. Okay, half the voters didn't want me. I got to be careful. I can't alienate too many voters. Apparently, that logic, the logic that took with him for good is that I won in the primary. By God, I am the man. So my logic went out the window on that. I tried, but I had said I have pulled that Jeff Landry's lever for the last time. I have been asked if I'm going to live by that. Again, I don't hide anything. I sent those emails out. Not a lot. Sent it out to about 4 or 5 of my closest friends. And I've been asked, am I going to live by that? And this is my response. If Jeff Landry turns this thing around and becomes an effective quarterback and a team player to help root corruption out of the state, yeah, I will reverse what I said and I will vote for him. He's got a lot of work to do, not the least of which is to stop blocking my public records request, okay? If he keeps up the same practice and thinks, I got plenty of votes to spare, let me piss a few more off, who cares? I got it covered. No, I absolutely will not support Jeff Landry under any circumstances if he has that attitude, and it's readily apparent that he does. Now, there's plenty of time to reverse that. There's plenty of time to be an effective quarterback. For Manziel, it's over. He never got his act together. It's an open question for you, Jeff Landry. Are you going to get your act together? Because last week was the equivalent of going into a game fresh off partying, and the fans were not happy with your performance. You hadn't been benched yet, but it's well coming if you keep it up. This is Robert Burns saying thank you once again for tuning in to this episode of Sound Off Louisiana. Thank you once again.